Whoa, 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 whoa. Wow, it is cramped in here. Oh, hey everybody. This is Chris, and we're inside the Rick and Morty pinball machine because today we're going to get inside information on the making of the Rick and Morty pinball machine. Today we're going to have a Zoom conversation with Scott Danesi, the designer of the game, and Charlie Emery, the owner/founder of Spooky Pinball, and we're going to talk about the game's development in a 3-part video series. So let's get started, and away we go. Today we are joined by pinball designer extraordinaire Scott Danesi, and we're going to talk about Rick and Morty from Spooky Pinball. Hey Scott, how's it going?
Hi everybody, how are you? Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for joining me today to talk about this awesome game, which by the way, I have the back glass sitting behind me.
I see that. That's very cool.
So the game right now is just completely empty. There's nothing in it at all. And so we're just going to kind of discuss the game, talk about some making of stuff. If you have some great stories to share, I'm sure everyone out there would love to hear about your design philosophy on this machine. It's definitely becoming a favorite of mine. I love the theme anyway, so it totally works for me.
That's awesome.
Is Total Nuclear Annihilation your first pinball design ever?
It was my first full-out pinball design that I actually created. Yes. Yeah.
So can you give us kind of a timeline about that game a little bit, and how you designed it and how Spooky ended up picking it up?
Yeah, sure thing. So I have worked for Pinball Life as the actual parts, the mechanical and electrical engineer over there, along with just all sorts of other tech stuff that I do. And I've always wanted to create a pinball machine from scratch, like a nice homebrew game. And I'm like, well, I work at Pinball Life now. I do all the engineering. I might as well try to put something together. So I created a game with all the greatest technology, but it looked like an old game. And I just wanted to kind of trick people into not knowing what was going on. Is this a new game? Is this an old game? What's going on here? So
for me, every time I saw it at a convention, I went and played it and got in line. I couldn't get enough of it, and I think that's the reason.
Yeah. It was definitely just a very strange thing to bring to market at that time.
Yeah.
And I do think it in my eyes, it went over pretty well with people for the most part. So I went ahead and made this homebrew. I gave myself a deadline. I started in November of 2015, and I said I've got 1 year to get this thing to Expo, and I didn't have anything yet. And I said, that's my goal. I got to get it to Expo, and it has to function and it has to be a 4-player game, keeping score. Those are my guide rails. So I just worked really hard for a year straight, every single day building this game. And I did bring it to Expo 2016. And that's when the first time, pretty much anyone saw it.
Okay.
And it went over quite well in that whitewood form. Since I already had a relationship with Spooky Pinball, because Spooky Pinball is a big client of Pinball Life, and we work together on many things. Charlie said, "Hey, it'd be nice to kind of throw this game in here as kind of just a little filler before Alice Cooper." There was a good handful of people that wanted to buy a few copies of it, and I'm like, "Well, I'm not making it. This is mine." I don't want to make it, but I'm like, well, if Spooky wants to copy it and make a few, that's fine. Let's figure it out. So I ended up building another complete game of Total Nuclear Annihilation in a Spooky retro cabinet, which I took the Spooky cabinet and I basically knocked down the angle of the playfield glass.
Oh wow!
So the whole back box is just physically lower, but the front of the game is the same height as a Spooky game.
Okay.
So I dumped it in there, and I did a bunch of other things and kind of productionalized it a little bit. Cleaned up all the CAD files and got everything kind of sorted on where every single part comes from, and then turned that over to Spooky, and they were able to replicate from that prototype.
Wow!
So that was how that happened. It was just a crazy experience, actually.
I'll bet. Damn, girl. So that's the first game you did.
Mm-hmm.
So then that goes over well. Now, how the heck did Rick and Morty come up? Did Charlie come to you? Did you go to him? What happened?
Yeah, he said, Scott, wait, you know, I really like your designs. I think he told me, he's like, you know, I think you're really good at what you do. And I want to have you build another game for us. It would be great. He's like, I would be honored if you would design a game for us. But he goes, this time, and I told him, like, this time, like, I can't do everything like I did. I killed myself for like 3 years straight, if not more than that, for like, you know, because I did everything, the audio, the software, the design, the hardware, the electrical engineering, the mechanics. Like, there's just so much to it.
Wow.
that, you know, it just took so much, like, and I'm like, it took too much out of me. I can't do it again.
Sure.
So I'm like, I need your help. I need Spooky Pinball's help to, you know, do things like if I want to include ramps or something. So I know they've got a vacuum forming machine, right?
Right.
So that, like, so I don't have to try and figure out how to vacuum form stuff myself, you know?
Yeah.
And just leverage as much of the stuff as I could on their side to get this done. And he totally agreed to it. And it was great. So I said, okay, cool. Throw me an empty cabinet and I'm going to get you something flipping. You know, I think that's a great way to actually build a game, as have somebody who's kind of like me build a complete flipping game with, you know, fake ramps in it, obviously, because I didn't have a vacuum forming machine. But, you know, we knew about the theme. And he said, I want you to build Rick and Morty. He goes, what if we could get you Rick and Morty? And I said, I'm 100% in, like 100% in if you can get me Rick and Morty.
So Charlie's the one that kind of said, you know.
Yeah, well, Charlie knew that I liked Rick and Morty a lot. And Charlie knew that a lot of the people that worked in the shop loved Rick and Morty. And then Charlie watched Rick and Morty and then fell in love with Rick and Morty.
Like, the amount of people that are into Rick and Morty is actually surprising, to be honest. I didn't realize it until I started talking to more people. And then everyone was like, oh my God, I love that show. And I'm like, well, how come I didn't know that? I love it too.
Yeah, it's like everyone loves it, but maybe no one was talking about it. I don't know. So yeah, once he said that, I was like, I'm 100% in. So now that I knew the theme, I wanted to create something chaotic, right? Because if you think of Rick and Morty as a whole, just from a macro level, right?
Yeah.
It is a very chaotic show, right? You basically have no control over what's happening.
That is true.
And you are, and I was like, well, the player can kind of be like in a Morty position, right? Where you're getting thrown around to these different adventures and you're just like you have no control of which adventure you're going to, no control of which dimension you're going to.
Right.
Like, and you have to battle through this stuff. Everything's crazy, you know? So I was like, okay, well, I get to create another just crazy design. So I'm like, and I love the crazy like 80s stuff, as you're probably aware.
Sure.
The wackier the playfield design, the better for me. So I started drawing up some designs that would be crazy in a way that would still be acceptable.
Okay.
So there's you can go overboard with it and make a crazy game, and it just doesn't, like, shots won't make sense and it just doesn't really work right. I like to push the fine lines of everything and like get right on the edge of people's comfort level.
Yeah.
Especially with TNA, right? With that music, I pushed that music right to the edge of what normal people who don't listen to electronic music would actually find acceptable. I could have gone way far with that. I could have gone like dubstep or drum and bass, and anyone who doesn't listen to electronic music would immediately write that off and be like, that sounds awful.
Right.
You know? There's these lines and you kind of have to identify where the lines are before you can start playing around with them. Mm-hmm. I put a pop bumper down there on the left sling as just as like an experiment. And I originally, when I put that down there in one of the designs, it reminded me of the game Andromeda, which is a really fun game, and it's one of my favorite game plan games.
Okay.
I was like, hey, the pop bumper down there is great and all, but wouldn't it be better if it was like, if it still had an in lane and an out lane, like behind that, you know?
Yeah.
So taking these mechanisms, moving around, trying it, but I only gave it like a 20% chance of like actually making it to production.
So it wasn't like, oh, I ran out of slingshot mechs. Let me see. You know what? Let's just put this pop bumper there.
I would love if that was the actual truth. That would be a great story. That would be so great. No, I just got weird with it. I actually drew it both ways with a slingshot and with the pop bumper in there, so that in my CAD file, I do everything in 3D. So I could flip a switch and it would flip to a slingshot or a pop bumper. So I could easily go back to the slingshot.
That's cool.
Like in the future, like if it didn't work, I don't have to do extra work to get it back.
Sure. Yeah.
But the slingshot version was never made, which is really cool. So the first whitewood I cut, I had the locations for the ramps and everything. The lock mechanism was in, the turnaround on the right side was there. It looked almost exactly like the production one, with the exception of the flipper was just a little bit higher, and there was some, the garage shot didn't quite feel right, but the inner loop felt way like really, really easy on the first whitewood.
Gotcha.
But the garage shot was just too hard. And I had a bunch of my close friends play it and give me just real honest feedback on it. And we all decided, yeah, that garage shot was just too difficult. So I was like, okay. So I pulled the flipper way down, which made the inner loop shot a little bit more difficult, but it eased up that garage shot. So now they're both like, it's still the inner loop's easier, but it's not, they're way more balanced.
Sure.
But they are completely out of the sweet spots on that flipper. And you're going to notice some weird stuff after I start telling you about this next time you play the game. So the pop bumper, right, I said I gave it a 20% chance of surviving the whole thing. But, we started playing it and it actually worked and it was fun. And then I was like, okay, well, fine. Everyone likes it. All my friends liked it. So I was like, so I gave it an 80% chance of staying in. And the reason I didn't give it 100% chance was because I was still experimenting in my head where that line was, and I didn't know if that was pushing it too far.
Right.
So that kind of, a little bit, but it was close. That's close to the line though. I just want to tell you, like, that's real close to the line. Yeah.
So, well, one of my questions was, but you've already answered it, was it ever a different theme at any point? So
it was not.
You knew going in, it was, because you know how sometimes some games start as Batman and then they become police force and then they have to adapt, the new theme on top. This was Rick and Morty from the start.
It was Rick and Morty from the start. Like for me, I don't like designing something that's generic without knowing what the theme's going to be, because otherwise you end up in this situation where you're almost re-theming something. Like when I took Earthshaker and I took an Earthshaker, redid it, put P-Rock system in it, and redid all the stuff. And I realized quickly that you really can't make Earthshaker anything but Earthshaker.
Right.
Right. Like it's the way the layout is and the fault opening and closing. Like you can't just re-theme that to something else. It's very difficult, and people will still look at it and be like, this, it's just Earthshaker, But yeah, this was always Rick and Morty. So
yeah, and your description of the chaos totally explains the way the game feels, which is great.
Yeah.
Now, how were Roiland and Harmon? Are they the guys? Yeah.
Yeah, Justin Roiland, Dan Harmon.
Yeah. How were they? Were they involved in the game's design at all? Did you talk to them? How were they? Were they receptive to it?
So they were not involved in design.
Okay.
But Justin was involved in the call outs.
Right.
So yeah, what's really cool about the call outs in there is that we just wrote down a bunch of call outs together as a team at Spooky. We said, okay, so here's the call outs for Justin. He'll go through and he'll read them, and then we, we're able to use those for the game, which is really great. But Justin's such a great dude. He went in and started just riffing off the actual stuff that we wrote, and it was just saying just real crazy stuff, like stuff that we didn't think about, like just hilarious things. So he had his thought process is in those call outs.
Yeah, now this is getting interesting. Fire up that multi-ball.
Was Adult Swim involved at all? I'm not really sure how that worked.
Adult Swim was the licensor. Yeah.
Right, okay. So they're really the ones you had to deal with. Did they have to approve things along the way, like art and sound?
It's standard. It's standard approval stuff.
Usual stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, but they were receptive to it. That's cool.
They were. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we showed them the design. We showed them the design of the game, and they're very happy with it. Yeah.
That's great. That's right.
Hey, robot, we need an extra ball over here.
So, did you have any input on the different models, Bloodsucker Edition, Standard? Did you do anything with that?
No, it was really, I think that was really Charlie who did a bunch of that stuff. At first, he's like, "Oh, we're gonna throw, purple armor on here," and I'm like, "Well, okay, well, let's see what it looks like. Send me a picture," So he sent me a picture, and I'm like, I don't know, that looks like okay, I guess, And then he's like, "Well, just come up here and look at it next time you're here." And so I went up there and I looked at it, and I'll tell you what, it blew me away.
You saw it in person.
I was like, dude, that picture you sent me was junk. I'm like, dude, like that. I don't know why, but that purple just, it didn't show up on the picture properly. When you see it in real life, it's like that. It's incredible.
The limited run of 750. Is there any reason it was that number?
That was a call on Charlie's part. He said that was about the limit of like how many games they could put out in a timely manner. Like, they didn't want to make people wait too long for their games.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is about how long people will wait and be okay with it.
Right.
They're building them slowly, and, they're not a huge company like Stern or anything. So it's like, yeah.
So let me ask you this. What did it feel like when it sold out in less than 4 hours for you?
Well, first of all, I was shocked, and I'm like, there's no way. I'm like, there's something wrong. Like, something happened with your thing or something. And he goes, no way, it actually did.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised, but then I was like, after I got over that surprise thing, I kind of made sense in my head because of that theme. Like, that theme really is extremely popular, and people really have wanted that theme for so long in pinball.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was like, okay, that it makes sense,
I was watching Pinside at the time when they announced it, which led me to the website, and people were posting about it. And then it was gone. It was like in a heartbeat. I went out to do something for work, and when I came back, I was like, let's check and see what people are saying about the game. It was gone. I couldn't believe it.
What the heck? Yeah. It was really cool. But then when I see that though, all of a sudden I go, oh crap, the pressure's on. Like, I really hope this, like, I got nervous at that point because nobody besides my close friends have flipped it.
Yeah.
That scares me a lot, because it's, and my friends aren't going to tell me, like, they're not yes men. So they'll be like, no, that sucks. Take that out. Like they'll absolutely tell me if something's messed up. So I didn't think it would have been like messed up, but I just didn't know if I had pushed too far,
With TNA, you got a little bit of feedback before it went.
Oh, I knew.
Sale.
I knew exactly like what was, what people were going to like and dislike about that game. But with Rick and Morty, I didn't, and all we had was just like a little like preview video of it, and it didn't have any super deep rules at that point, and it was just like, I hope people like it because it sold out very quick.
I think the preview video also had custom speech, didn't it? Wasn't that narrated by Justin as well? Hey, Morty, we're doing a pinball or something like that.
Oh, yeah. That was done by Justin.
Yeah, yep. So that's going to sell games right there because you're thinking
I know
they're involved.
They could have made a pinball machine about anybody, like some superhero or a rock band, but no, it's about us, Morty. We've got a pinball machine now. It's mostly about me, though, not so much about you, but hey, ride those coattails, kid.
I had to do all the music for it, too, and I didn't have all of the music done for it at that point, so it was like, there's still stuff that had to be done there, and it's just a lot of work. Like, it sold out great. Keep your head down. Keep going. Because
you got to stay in front of the train because it's not going to stop, right?
Definitely.
Head to the garage and we'll go to another dimension.
Okay, I'd like to move on to the game itself, if that's okay. Toys and gimmicks and stuff, and I'll just kind of run down one at a time. I'd love to hear about the design if you've got something interesting.
The ship on top came a little bit later. So in my whitewood, I had 3D printed the house in the back as a placeholder.
I love that.
So I put that in there, and then I had this open area above the lock where it's the front yard of the house.
Oh.
If you look at it, you can see the grass and stuff there, and there's like, so I was gonna leave that alone, and then we were talking, and Charlie's like, well, we got to put something there, like the ship could be in the front yard. I'm like, absolutely, let's try it, So we had to source a toy that was approved by Adult Swim, and get that in there. And then we're like, well, let's make it move a little bit, So we put a spring underneath it and then had a thing that would come up and shake it, So that was pretty cool.
Can you talk about the toy? Did you have it made somewhere else, or did you get it from?
Oh no, it's a pre-made toy, but Spooky Pinball modified every single one of them with one of the RGB lights, and the two headlights that are on there are controlled by the computer as well.
Okay.
So those are all part of the light show and everything, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so they did a really good job doing that.
Run, Morty!
The horseshoe lock was already there before that got there.
Yeah, so what I did was I built the actual pinball game without any toys or anything in it,
Right.
just so I could make sure like the geometry worked and it was kind of fun to play, right? Because that's the most important thing to me. Yeah, from there, then everything else, all the toys, we just kind of figured out. I left a big area open on the left side.
Yeah.
Because there was two places to put the portal gun. I gave like two options for us to debate about. One was in the shooter lane, right? So then, you could kind of like shoots the ball sort of. The other one was the right on that flat plastic on the left side, where the death crystals are now. And that was aimed at the garage where the portal is.
Oh.
So that was just another one, but we thought like, hey, it would be way cooler just to put it over on the shooter lane, and then we put some death crystals over on the left side instead. So yeah, it was pretty cool. And those death crystals are really cool. Actually, they Spooky Pinball, yeah, they actually cast those.
Oh, did they?
Those are cast out of resin, which is super neat.
Oh wow, yeah, it has a great look when it lights up, especially.
Oh, it's crazy, isn't it?
I actually bought the Death Crystal mod over the Scoop.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you see, because it just it kind of hides the spring a little bit on the ship for me, and it just seemed to fit there. I really like that one. Can we go back to the lock shot for a minute?
Sure.
Did you always have in mind the way that worked?
I have a little notebook where I keep different ideas of mechanisms, and that was the second iteration of the TNA locking behind drop targets thing.
Okay.
That was just another variation of it. Instead of it going in a straight inline, I just bent it around so it could come back.
All right.
And if you look at the CAD files of that actual mechanism, that horseshoe thing is in the exact center of the flippers, so that when you shoot through it, it should deliver. If it doesn't, if your guide rails are adjusted properly and they don't bounce off anything, it should deliver that ball. Like if you shoot it in on the right side, it should deliver it to the left flipper perfectly, and then vice versa, opposite when it's open.
It's a really neat area because the way that the drop targets work, you lock the ball, you shoot the ball when the lock is lit on the left, the drop target pops up and blocks it, and then if you happen to hit it out of there, it goes to the other side.
Yeah, Eric did a really good job with that because it's a very difficult thing to get drop targets to catch balls properly and reliably.
I'll bet.
Even with TNA, like I had to do a lot of little trickery with those optos and stuff. And with Rick and Morty, there's actually a long range opto in front of both drop targets and the scoop. I don't know if you've noticed that at all, but if next time you look at it, take a look. There's a long range opto there, so it knows when a ball is incoming.
Okay.
So the computer gets like a split-second notification that a ball is coming full speed at that mechanism.
Yeah. And
what it can do is it can, if it wants to keep a ball behind a drop target, it'll actually pulse the drop target up and hold it while that ball is incoming. So if that ball hits that drop target, the drop target doesn't drop and it just bounces the ball off it, and it will transfer the other ball around.
Wow. Yeah.
Pretty crazy. It does a lot of stuff in a very, very fast time.
It really does. Yeah, it's a really cool gimmick. But what about the scoop in the middle? Because that thing shoots it out almost immediately sometimes, which reminds me of TNA, which I'm thinking you borrowed that same idea.
We wanted to try and keep that, and having a very long range scoop shot like that is also super risky. I did toy with the idea of firing it on to the left instead of to the right flipper. Even a brand new scoop will never shoot perfectly straight every time, especially in a long range shot like that. So I erred toward the side of making it shoot to the higher part of the flipper.
Okay.
So that if it messes up, it either goes to the low part of the flipper or it hits the slingshot. And when I decided like not to put it on the left side, because if it just shot it at the pop bumper, it would just be totally insane. Like it's a very unexpected thing. The player would probably get frustrated by that.
Multi-ball time, motherfucker!
you mentioned the portal shot into the garage from the upper flipper. That's not the easiest to make, but it's kind of balanced.
It's supposed
there.
to be very difficult. Yeah.
But the shooting the garage when the portal is lit, or even when it's not lit, right? The ball immediately spits out by the left. Was that always part of your idea there?
It was. Yeah. There's a staged ball in there. I'm a big fan of orbits, and this game actually doesn't have any traditional orbits like TNA does. But it has a virtual orbit, which is, been done before. But this one, when you shoot the scoop from the right orbit and it goes all the way around under the house and into the scoop, the timing of that ball kicking out back into the in lane is about the same time as that ball would have taken to get all the way around and back to your flipper again.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So, and I'm also a big fan of like surprise things sometimes happening like that, in a fair way, obviously.
Sure.
But like, I think a game that does it very unfairly is Spectrum. I don't know if you've played much of that.
Yeah.
But I think that the first few times people walk up to that game, it just goes and they're dead and they're like, what the heck? Yeah, it's a very, you kind of have to give them a warning with that, but because that comes out fast out of that left thing. And if you're not ready for it, you'll miss it and it'll go right down the middle.
You start instinctively holding the left flipper up as that ball is slowly moving to the garage. You're like, uh-oh, unless it's, what is it? Pickle Rick, I think, is the only time it holds it, right? If you shoot the orbit and it stays in
Pickle
there.
Rick will hold it. Yep.
Yeah, but even then, you're holding it for Pickle Rick. Boom, there it comes.
Exactly.
God,
yeah.
Turn myself into a pickle, Morty! I'm Pickle Rick!
Obviously, we know it as a Magna save, but I don't know if you have a different term.
Yeah, it's a Magna save, basically.
Save.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a Magna save on the right side, but it's a little different in this one. Can you talk about how that works?
Yeah. So this one is a little bit different. So a lot of Magna saves recently in more modern games are the type of Magna save where they've got a metal core going through the middle of the magnet and through the playfield. And basically when that activates, it grabs the ball, right? And stops it dead. This one's a little bit more old school. It's like Black Knight, the original Black Knight, or Jungle Lord had a Magna save like that. But those aren't gimmies if you were to activate the Magna save when a ball is heading for an outlane, because there's no center core in that poking through the playfield. This one is countersunk into the playfield pretty close, but it's not at all going to grab the ball at a high rate of speed.
Right.
So it's more of like it's more of a like a finesse thing to try and get the ball. If it starts bouncing around in there, try and get the ball away from the outlane and back into play.
It feels like a nudger.
It's a nudger. Yeah. It's like nudging help. It's a different type of thing. Yeah.
It's great because I tap. I feel like I tap.
Yeah, you tap. You always tap. Yeah. Never hold. Because like if you hold it and it does grab it, it's going to move around a lot, and you're going to have to really time that well so it doesn't just go out lane. And then remember, it could just run out of power on you. With that little battery meter goes all the way down.
That's true. So
you never know when it's going to release. You're like, oh crap, I did put the Magna save in there like last minute.
Oh, okay.
And I did that kind of as a joke, so I could tell Charlie like, oh, don't worry, we can pull that out to save BOM cost. And I pulled one of those moves on him, and he goes, oh no, we can't take that out. That's way too fun.
You pulled the old, what is it? The old Williams trick. Let's put drop targets in here so that they don't notice the other 20 things we put in. They just have us remove the drop target.
Exactly.
But he said keep it in. That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's really funny because I talked to a bunch of the other designers, and they always tell me like funny stories about how they like put stuff in like that, like decoys.
Yeah.
To just pull out so that they could get the BOM down a little bit.
Sure.
And so I actually tried it, but it failed.
Yeah.
I failed at that. Charlie goes, no, that's fun. Like, you have to leave that.
Well, that's it for part 1. Make sure you join me next time for a continuation of our conversation with Scott Danesi on the making of the Rick and Morty pinball machine. Until then, keep on flipping.